Hi, I got 15, 20 minutes to go over what I usually do in a day or two seminar. So we'll just dive right into this, okay? Like, one of the things that I live on a small farm within a driving distance of 3 million people. So it's an opportunity for me to root myself down in place, but also I'm connecting with the larger city around us. So I find that in rooting down, I'm finding myself not only connecting to the city people around me, but to people around the world who are also opening themselves up to a new understanding of what it means to be in relationship to the community of all creation. So one of the things that has been coming up, I usually like to take what are the issues that come up in public discussions, and you hear a lot of, I'm beginning to hear a lot about this concept of One Health. What is this principle of One Health? The health, or if we want to use theological language, the health or shalom of soil, plants, animals, human beings is one subject. So if this happens to be true, let's just assume it is, that means that chronic human health issues and the staggering cost of healthcare are related to the increasing costs of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides to maintain crop production, which is also connected to the increasing compaction and loss of soil structure that leads to water and wind erosion, that this water contamination that we have can be due to the runoff of soils, fertilizers, and chemicals off of our agricultural fields, and also the problem of climate change. Elevated levels of CO2 in the atmosphere contributing to extreme weather events and global warming. Now, how often do we hear discussions about that in our church or in our public discussions? I don't know. Is that something that you have heard before? Is that something new? Well, this is a human body, a picture of the human body, and the number of cells in the human body is indicated by the orangish part. 30 trillion human cells in the human body. And what is the rest of the green? Microbial cells, microbes, bacteria, fungus, all kinds of invisible living forms that are not only living on us, but they're living inside of us. They're just all over the place. 100 trillion cells. There's probably some estimate, 70 to 90% of our human body is our microbiome is made up of microbes, not our own human cells. So when it comes to genes, human beings have 23,000 genes in their body. Human beings have actually fewer genes than a rice plant. But as you look here, there's probably 2 million microbial genes. Now, one of the things that affects our gene expression, how our bodies function, are these microbial genes. And depending on, there's a term called epigenetics. Depending on what kind of environmental factors if we have stress, trauma, it can affect the way our genes express themselves, leading to a kind of maybe a disease or some kind of other trauma that can also be passed down to future generations. Also, the kind of food that we eat, there could be some kind of trigger mechanism that affects gene expression. And this is all influenced by our microbial genes. Well, let's take a look at the soil. I don't know, oftentimes, if you take a look at a shovel of soil, is this a good soil or bad soil? like most people don't even know anymore. So if you take a look at this, the soils have many layers. This is a soil that's very, very compacted. When you have a compacted soil like this, you don't have water infiltration, you don't have air infiltration, you don't have microbes growing in your soil because they can't breathe. So this affects everything: plant diversity, water cycling, energy cycling, mineral cycling. This is very common. If you go out to any agricultural field outside of Goshen, Elkhart, Nebraska, Japan, this is one of the major problems facing agricultural soils around the world. So, what's the difference between a rock and soil? Like, we don't ask these kind of questions, do we? The only difference between a rock and a soil is the presence of life. Plant roots exude acids which can actually dissolve rocks that help start the genesis of soil. So over time, if you take a look at the picture on your right, you see that black layer? This is liquid sunlight. It's carbon being taken out of the atmosphere and exuded out of the roots. I'll show you some pictures of that later on. It's so cool. So this is a picture of a tallgrass prairie. This is the way we see what's going on above ground. We have all these different plants, different heights and everything like that, but the same thing is going on under the ground. And one of the things that we don't see is that all of these plants are connected by what is called a mycorrhizal fungal network. Has anybody ever heard about that? There we go. There's 3 people here. That's great. But with the existence of a mycorrhizal fungal network, plants are capable of sharing water, nutrients. They can share messages with one another that there's insects around that we better be careful for. Plants can also share they can share genes with one another. If a plant is stressed and is not because of drought, they can ask for genes from a plant that is more drought tolerant to increase their genetic adaptation to those kind of conditions. And this happens on a microbial level. Each plant has their own microbiome around their roots of the plant. And each variety of plant has a unique biome, but microbes like bacteria, funguses, can very easily share genetic material, which is then taken up into the plant, and I'll show you here. This is how it's done. Plants actually farm microbes. They send out sugars out of the root tips of their plant, and then microbes gather around that root tip, and they are absorbed into the root, and superoxides are able to strip off the cell wall of the microbe and absorb the nutrients off of that. And then the DNA of the microbes are spit out of the root hairs of the plant. Along with sending out the DNA, they're also capable of asking those DNA to search out nutrients that the plant needs in order for it to grow. So, I don't know how many vegetarians there are in this room, but plants are actually carnivores. So we have to be, they're carnivores, so sorry. So those who want to think about cutting down on meat consumption, well, by eating plants, we're eating carnivores. So this cycle just happens in healthy soil. But what stops this kind of cycle from happening? The kind of things that we associate with modern agriculture. If we till the soil, if we provide fertilizer or any kind of chemicals, any kind of sides, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, it stops this functioning of the way God created the world to be. Look at this. Isn't this cool? 15 years ago, they were unable to take a photograph. This is a picture of a plant root. And you'll see these fine threads. These are the mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with plants. And they take through photosynthesis, they're able to exude these little round balls. That's sugar water. It's oyatsu for the bacteria. It's snacks for the bacteria in the soil. They come and gather around the plant, and then they turn into food for the soil, for the plant. These are the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They act like a tenteki tube, like an IV. I'm talking Japanese for Teresa here, because I'm not sure if she still understands English or not. So, yeah, you're good? Okay. But here, these mycorrhizal fungi are able to infect the root of the plant and send out these root hair filaments and extract nutrients and spread out this liquid carbon to vast distances away from the plant to help enrich soil. Again, tillage, these are very, very sensitive to chemicals in tillage. And with modern agriculture, their function is unable to be carried out. So here we have with trees, the mycorrhizal fungi are much easier to see. So here, there's not very many in that picture, but it's mostly mycorrhizal fungi that's able to extract minerals and nutrients from, a far greater surface area of the soil. They're extremely important to life. So if a farmer was going to go out to their field, how do you tell if without a microscope, that your soils are functioning? Well, if you dig up a plant and you have all this sticky goo, this sugar and microbe spit and goo that they exude, you'll find that the roots will be the soil sticking to them like this. And this is what a good soil looks like. A functioning soil that is sequestering carbon and mitigating climate change. It looks like, some people call it chocolate cake, or, well, some people say cottage cheese, but black cottage cheese, maybe that's not such a good image. Okay, so what can we learn from Scripture? Since launching out on this journey of regenerative agriculture, I've been looking at Romans 8 in a really, really different way. There's this, talks about the Spirit which raised Christ from the dead. It is the same Spirit that leads us to be God's children. Romans, I think it's 14. But then in verse 19 through 23, it talks about the creation is waiting for the children of God to be revealed. It is groaning as in the pains of childbirth, awaiting for something to emerge and come to life. So this Christ's victory over the power of death opens the door for both humanity and creation to experience the first fruits of a world made new. Like, oftentimes I've heard Christians thinking that climate change, what can we do about it? There's nothing we can do about it. Well, we'll just have to wait until the Lord returns before anything can be renewed. But I would like to suggest that that is not so. If you had to wait for, women in this room, if you had to wait for Christ to return to give birth, something is waiting to be born now. The creation is groaning and longing for something new to be born. So what are functioning soils capable of doing regarding plant and animal health? Through healthy soils, we can increase the nutrient density of our food. We can produce phytochemicals and enzyme that strengthens plants' resistance to disease and pests. And when we consume those same foods, they also help us to fight off diseases. And there's been a lot of scientific research that's been done about this. This isn't just something that I'm coming up with all of a sudden. So water holding capacity, looking at that healthy chocolate cake, an increase of soil aggregation of 1% can increase water holding capacity by 25,000 gallons. That's a lot of water. So this means it's possible to mitigate problems of both flooding and droughts. I've increased the soil organic matter content in my soils from 6% to 12%. So you multiply that times 6. It's 150,000 gallons of water per acre of land. Carbon sequestration. This is something most people don't realize, that 50% of the carbon in the atmosphere is the result of unhealthy agricultural practices. The other 50% has to do with fossil fuel usage. So with that in mind, it's not just shifting over to electric vehicles that's going to solve the problems of climate change. So second point here, agricultural soils are capable, globally, agricultural soils are capable of sequestering twice the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's an incredible amount. And a 1% increase in soil carbon can reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere by 50 parts per million. If you raise it 2%, it's 100 parts per million. 3%, you reduce the carbon in the atmosphere to pre-industrial revolution levels. This is doable, folks. This is something that's doable. So global warming can be eliminated by a commitment to stewarding the land in the way that honors the way God created our soils to function. It's not an impossibility. It's very, very doable. So paradigms and the renewal. We hear the word paradigm shift and things, but the Bible talks about a renewal of the mind. Paradigms are belief systems that set up rules and regulations that shape how we act. So no matter what we do in life, there is always a model of what we think things should be, by which we judge our position, and there's a logic by which we judge our position and actions. This is from Arden Anderson. But biblically, we read in Romans that we should not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So then we need to find a way then to practice this renewed mind. So that's something that is a challenge for all of us, and I want to show you some ways in which I have been doing that in the last couple. I just have some images here now that I want to share. 2 years ago, I bought the distribution rights to a film called To Which We Belong, and a friend of mine subtitled that movie. The word regenerative agriculture does not exist in the Japanese language, so we had to think up a word. And my wife and I and a cultural anthropologist friend in Tokyo started showing this movie across Japan. And it has been shown in 400 locations from Okinawa all the way into Hokkaido. And more than 10,000 people have seen this movie. I did that as a strategy to first introduce the existence of a word. After seeing this movie, the next stage has been, well, how do we actually practice this mindset? So last year, I started a regenerative agricultural school in which we're teaching people how to practice observing the soil and how to heal soil and how to farm in this image with this mindset. At the same time, in these groups, we're teaching people how to communicate using nonviolent communication strategies, to foster community life within these groups. last year was also on the cover of the Japanese Farm Journal. This magazine has a circulation of 220,000 people. The journal our small group of farmers, of 20 farmers, there's five of us that have written articles for this magazine in the last year. I write a monthly column for the magazine, and the editor of the magazine wanted to know, how did I come across these ideas? And so he wanted me to tell my life story. I said, do you really want to know? And so I wrote it in the form of a letter to my granddaughter. And I started telling him about my roots in the Protestant Reformation and the peasants' movement of the 1500s, and the Mennonites, and our movement to Ukraine and the movement to America, some of the struggles that we've had in maintaining community life. This is all told to my granddaughter, but there's 220,000 people or subscribers to this magazine that are listening in. This is part of My Regenerative Journey school. We invited Chuck Schembre from Understanding Ag in the United States to join us in helping to learn about soil assessments. Standing with a camera in the back is a University of Hokkaido professor and a great translator that's just explaining things to about a group of about 30 farmers. My son, Yohei, we have 75 sheep on the farm. His way of relating to animals, I just think of the Good Shepherd. Continuing on with educational work with farmers and in different parts of Hokkaido and main island in Japan. We've also developed a good relationship with researchers in various universities across Japan as well, and influencing the way in which agricultural research is being carried out in the country. So, concluding remarks. The renewal of the world takes place literally at the grassroots, by meaning both people and soil. Peacemaking, shalom making is or can be an imaginative process of world making in which people gather together to heal their own lives and also the life of all creation. Diversity is the key to ecosystem function. Plants from different families need each other in order to live and thrive. Can this perhaps inform our work in justice work and anti-racism? I very much spent a lot of my earlier years trying to understand the violence in the industrial food system and identifying the Cargills and the Monsantos and blah, 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 and all the evil that's in the world. There's not a whole lot of hope in that. How can we be that beloved community? Had a group of 20 people that we're working to turn our lives around and to heal our farms. And we know how hard it is. But that small group of people is now working to transform all of Japanese agriculture in the dialogues that are happening now with policymakers and university professors. So, in closing, I think that we can go about this work with a confidence and a joy because of Christ's lordship of all. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Wow.
This work that I shared with you today is kind of the outgoing, like the mission of the church. This focus on the work of worship and character formation of the church so that we can go out in mission. We're thinking of, my wife and I have been praying and thinking about the creation of a worship space that would be reflective of this kind of shalom, in which we have a rammed earth floor using straw bale insulation and sheep wool for the insulation of the roof, so that we can just experience all of the goodness of creation just by entering into a sacred space. And then also have a time to also focus on the Lamb of God. So connecting, just real earthy, practical things of life with the eternal in a sacred space. That's something we need creative ways of communicating, these deep longings and connections with God. So that's something I really want to focus on. Another thing, I was just talking with Eric at lunchtime, not everyone is going to be a farmer, and I don't want everybody to be a farmer if they're not called, it's not their vocation. But you know what? Every one of us is involved in agriculture anyways, because we all eat. We all eat. Yes. We all eat. So every day we have 3 chances to shape the way the world is used. So can there be congregationally supported agriculture, linking together urban congregations and rural, either congregations or rural, like farmers, so that we can be modeling a new kind of food system that reflects this shalom of God? It requires no new money. It just requires us a shifting in the way in which we think and how we actually spend the money that we do on food. No new money. And it's amazing. Before coming here, I was at a regenerative ag conference in Madison, Wisconsin. And it was amazing how many Yoders and Stoltzfuses and Weavers and Hochstettlers were at this meeting. There's a lot, and also non-ethnic Mennonites that I met at that conference as well, and they are just longing to deepen this kind of connection. So, I think there's just tremendous opportunities for the church to be a people of hope. And, with food, it doesn't matter whether people are African American or European. We all eat. To sit down at the table together, we need each other. So, I think there's just all kinds of opportunities, to bring healing not only to creation, but to build relationships among one another, and for a big vision of how God wants all people to live. So.